Aloha, and welcome to another session of A Better Day. I'm State Senator Sam Slom, representing the Senate minority here in the state capitol, and Happy New Year. Here we go again for another year. I hope your holidays were pleasant and you had a lot of family time and an opportunity to thank God for your blessings and for the many things that we have. You know, sometimes we concentrate on a lot of the negatives around us in our life, and particularly here in legislation, the state capitol. We had a wild year, 2013, with our regular session, with the so-called special session, the same-sex marriage and all of that. And guess what? Here we are again, January 15th. We're going to start it all over again for the regular session. And some of the old favorites will be back again. Medical marijuana, well, an extension of marijuana probably to decriminalize it. Physician-assisted suicide, gambling, all your favorites. They'll be here and more. But this year, being an election year, it's a year that you want to be particularly attentive to. You want to try to come down to the legislature to take part in the hearings, or at least watch them on Olelo. Send in testimony. Get involved, because it is a major election year, and we down here make decisions that may or may not be to the best interest of you and your family. So you want to stay engaged. There's plenty of ways of getting information. Our website, the legislative website, is one of the best in the country right now, and you can call any legislative office. You certainly can call mine to have the staff help you, to guide you through hearings or testimony or schedules or where a bill is and all of that. It's important that you do that. And I know sometimes people get frustrated and they feel that they can't make a difference, but you can make a difference, and particularly during this an election year. Well, we've got also a 2-year supplemental operating budget to look at, and we've got the same kinds of economic problems that have seeped over from 2013. We haven't gotten any better. We're talking about shortfalls at the state level. The city and county is short of funds again, and so what do they think of first? They think of raising taxes or adding fees, and you're the only ones that can pay for all of us. So there'll be a lot of debate this year. It's going to be important. Also, the issue of minimum wage. Again, you've seen that in the past several weeks there have been demonstrations nationally and locally headed by labor unions to try to increase the minimum wage. And we'll talk about that on a future program. And I do have a very special guest for you today. And we're going to be talking about the Second Amendment, and we're going to be talking about firearms legislation, firearms safety, and local issues. But I just want to remind you, the reason that this program that we've done for several years now is called A Better Day. Well, you know, you've heard the governor's mantra is a new day, and former Governor Lingle talked about a new beginning and all that. We're talking about a better day, because that's what you deserve. Some people say you deserve the government that you get. No, not in Hawaii. You deserve a lot better, but you've got to take part. You've got to participate, and you can't give up. The thousands of people that came down here, for example, in October, late October, November, early November, about the same-sex marriage issue. Many of them had never been to the Capitol before. Many of them were not registered to vote. You've got to do that. You've got to get involved. Get registered to vote, help a candidate, or decide to run for yourself this year for a state or federal or local office. There's still plenty of time to do it. Again, you can call my office, or you can call the Legislative Access Room and get all the help that you need. Well, here we are facing a new year, and one of the issues that always rears its head is the issue of firearms ownership, possession, use of, and so forth, and the Second Amendment to the United States and Hawaii constitutions. And it always seems to be an issue, particularly when there is a terrible incident that happened, like Sandy Hook and like some of the random shootings that have taken place before. And in our own backyard, an issue that has brewed with the Cocoa Head firing range. So what better person to introduce to talk about all this than Dr. Maxwell Cooper, who is, among other things, the legislative liaison for the Hawaii Rifle Association. Many of you know Dr. Cooper. He was a long-time Hawaii resident. Now we have to give him up 6 months of the year to the state of Washington, but he's always here during the legislative session, and we're very pleased to have him today. Dr. Cooper, welcome to A Better Day.
Thank you, Senator. I'm really happy to be here. It's always a pleasure to watch you work.
Well, you're busy even when you come over here on vacation and all of that. You get involved in legislative hearings and neighborhood boards and city council and all of that. Tell us a little bit about your background, though, for people that may not know you.
Oh, well, I'm 68 years old now.
You're just a kid, for goodness sakes.
Right.
Yeah.
I come from a family of farmers, ranchers. Yeah, my parents both grew up on small homesteads in Missouri.
Yeah.
So I have a long association with agrarian activities, including shooting and hunting. A man, an uncle of mine, saved my life with a rifle when I was 5 years old. He shot a rabid raccoon that was about to do a weed eater thing on my head, and I didn't find
and
out.
Raccoons are big.
Yeah.
And mean.
He was out in the middle of the day and he jumped out of a tree at me. So there's
Wow.
no excuse for that kind of behavior from a nocturnal animal that avoids humans, except they're rabid.
Yeah.
And I didn't know till I got to medical school that he'd actually saved my life, because if you are inoculated with the rabies virus in the head and neck, there's not enough time for the shots, the immunizations, and death is pretty much universal at that point.
And I hear the shots are no pleasant thing either.
That's what I've heard. They're all in the abdomen.
It's a series,
mostly, but it's a series of about 20.
Yeah, you're talking about the rabid raccoon, and I was watching a sportsman show a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about a skunk, and the skunk was out during the daytime too, and they figured it was rabid, and in fact it was.
Yeah,
so
it was one of the nice things about practicing medicine and answering emergency room calls at night here, or any time here during the 20 years I worked at Castle Hospital. You didn't have to worry about rabies from dog bites.
Yeah.
We're rabies free still.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So you were what kind of doctor? What did you do here for 20 years?
Well, I started out as an intern at the Army Hospital in 1970. I volunteered to join the Army during Vietnam because I knew I was going to get the best medical training I could get. My background is military. My father was career Air Force. I've lived in 3 continents, 6 states. The longest I had lived anywhere up to that point when I moved to Hawaii was my college dormitory. Went to University of Oregon. That's where I met my wife. We moved over here in 1970, and I started my internship at Tripler, and then I did another 4 years of general surgery training here, and stayed in the Army. Took 2 years off from Hawaii to go to Walter Reed for a plastic surgery fellowship, and then I came back here as the Army's, the Pacific's plastic surgeon, and that was very interesting. I got to travel to the Pacific Islands. They were territories at the time, and do surgery there. And I finished up my active service there, but I continued in reserves for a total of 32 years, and now I'm retired. From that,
but we won't let you retire, and you still come back. And
I got interested in gun politics here in the early 90s, when there was a proposed ban on semi-automatic rifles and other various things, and I have been lobbying unofficially. I've been the representative for the State Rifle Association, the Hawaii Rifle Association, which is the affiliate here of the National Rifle Association, for about the last 20 years.
A lot of doctors and surgeons have come out against gun usage, gun ownership, and so forth, and I think there's even an association. The only other doctor besides you, or the only other surgeon that I'm familiar with that's spoken out nationally consistently, is Dr. Timothy Wheeler, who has also written a couple of books about that. But mainly, most of the doctors and the people in emergency rooms, and you were talking about the emergency rooms, talk about how awful gunshot wounds are, and so we have to ban guns. Well, how do you react to that?
Well, first of all, let me stick up for the surgeons, because I think there are not nearly half of them are anti-gun.
It's the ones that get the publicity, though, because
of course,
since the media are pushing, anti-gun stuff, anti-Second Amendment. But
well,
go ahead.
The black talon ammunition was a good example. Some years ago, I think Winchester came out with a pistol round that they named Black Talon. Well, there automatically you were giving the Brady campaign all kinds of advantages. And they found surgeons who would testify that you could have your fingers cut if you were exploring a wound that had been caused by one of these. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Surgeons are at risk. They can get cut on bone. They cut themselves frequently. But the surgeons who said that, I don't think had ever been inside a body with their fingers, and it doesn't happen. So that's the kind of thing that the media will turn things like that. Now, there are two groups, internal medicine, family practice to a degree, but mostly the pediatricians ascribe to the fact that keeping the non-fact, really, it's not a fact, but they teach that in their training programs. If you go now to an internist or a family practice doctor, or you take your kids to a pediatrician for the first time, part of the intake questionnaire that you fill out is, do you have firearms in your house? And they're taught during their residency training programs that that's a health risk, which of course it isn't. So I think surgeons are better off with that kind of understanding.
Okay, touche. We'll
they
give that to the surgeons.
take care of people with gunshot wounds, and some of them are quite familiar. Emergency room docs, they sometimes don't get the big picture either.
You know, what you're saying about the part of the courses and all, about is there a gun in the house, firearm in the house, that's becoming much more widespread now. You're getting that through educational surveys, you're getting it through health surveys, if you go for health insurance and all of that. And it makes it really difficult, particularly in this day and age of everybody being on a list and lists not being taken care of, particularly by the governmental agencies. But we see more and more of that, right?
Well, safe storage is a very important concept, and I'm very happy that people are being asked, oh, you have guns in your house? Are they secured from unauthorized access? Because that's terribly important. But to say that they're per se a cause of injury in your home, there are some bogus science studies which support that, but really that's not the case. There are more firearms out there, a higher percentage of people with firearms in their home, and a lower incidence of firearms accidents and death.
Well, John Lott, Dr. John Lott, but not a medical doctor, John Lott, is probably the national expert on databases and statistical information. And I mean, he's proven over and over again what you're saying. I think the problem is when you're talking about firearms, you're talking about Second Amendment issues. I think long ago we won the argument based on rationality and reason and facts, but it's the emotional stories that always grab the headlines and grab people, and even some well-meaning people that normally are very factual and everything else, but if there has been an incident involving firearms, all of a sudden they seem to flip over and say we've got to have more legislation, we've got to have more bans. They misname and misidentify particular kinds of weapons as assault weapons and other things, and so that's why we have the continuing debate both nationally and locally.
This is not the only issue like that. It's really unfortunate that in our country especially, public policy is not based on scientific information. It's based on emotional.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and you're right about that. It goes to other issues as well. And then maybe years later people start thinking about things. I mean, for me, the perfect example is Obamacare. I mean, everybody rushed to judgment. We had the minority leader of the U.S. House, Nancy Pelosi, at the time saying, well, first we'll pass the bill and then we'll read it. So we can
find out what's in it.
Yeah, then we can read it, 2,000 pages. Well, here we are, 5 years later, and we found out, now some of us were quick reads. We were able to discern what was in it, initially. But for most people, if there's not a cause and effect immediately, and in most cases there's not, it takes them a while to put the pieces together, and unfortunately a lot of damage has been done or is being done. And I think that's probably the case with Second Amendment issues as well, which also happen to do with home protection, concealed carry, and things like that. What issues do you think have been the most important and are likely to be the most important in Hawaii, Second Amendment related?
Well, last year was a terrible year for the Second Amendment. It started out that way because Obama, the Senate nationally had opened fire on the Second Amendment, and a lot of gun bills that are, I think, boilerplate bills is what they are, that they arise from the Brady campaign or whatever they call the current version of that, and they're distributed to every state legislature in the state. And there are a few individuals within each state legislature that look at something and they don't know very much about gun safety. They don't know very much about the Second Amendment, and the bills are cleverly written and they look like, well, this is a good idea, you know, I think I'm going to introduce this. And some of those folks are fairly innocent, but a lot of them say, well, I was thinking about running for the Senate next year and this looks like a good way to get my name out there as somebody who's in favor of public protection. That happened. Fortunately, through people like you and a whole lot of support down here among people who looked at the bills, really, and a very statewide organized effort from all sorts of people in the shooting and firearms community, and a lot of people who didn't own a gun or never wanted to own a gun, but they were supporters of the Bill of Rights, came out, and essentially all of those, about 10 really nasty bills, they reminded me of what I've read historically about Nazi Germany in 1939. We're going to make lists of people who are incompetent, and one of the things they won't be able to do is possess firearms or ammunition. And nothing passed.
And that was one of the issues, in fact, that came up with the major bill last year about you know, putting people on a list, and then the mental health community came forward and say, whoa, wait a minute, we don't like the sound of that, we don't want to do that, it's counterproductive. Here you're telling people to go get mental health treatment, and then now you're saying in a legislative bill, if they've had any treatment, and if they've had a little bit at all, then they're going to be marked as unreliable, undesirable, not allowed to own firearms, and they took a position on that. But I remember during that legislative debate, it was a very unusual situation, because wasn't the Hawaii Rifle Association at odds with the National Rifle Association on that particular bill?
We were at odds with the National Rifle Association on background checks, because federally one of the big issues was mandatory background checks for private transfers. Well, we don't have that here. We already have.
For the transfers.
We already have. All transfers are registered, records are kept here, so it's not an issue in Hawaii. There was one particular portion of the law that sort of escaped that. If you were bringing a firearm in from out of state, like when I moved here as a military officer, I brought firearms. When I had a federal firearms license, I could buy firearms and transport them across state lines, and I built my collection that way. It was wonderful. I picked up some great antiques when I was at medical meetings. When I brought them in, the law didn't require me to have a background check. It didn't say they couldn't do it. The HPD, it wasn't required, and they were doing it. They were doing instant background checks using the federal system for federal. They were putting my name and anybody else through the state computers for a state mental health check, and they were sending a letter to doctors. They didn't have to do that. But this bill that we disagreed with NRA about just says, well, yeah, okay, but you can only charge one time for the fingerprints, not every time, and it passed.
But after it passed, after it became law, then there was a problem with registration, long lines of registration, the time that was taken, the fees that can be charged, because those fees can be increased. Is that not correct?
Well, the fees were set by the FBI, and so far they've decreased over the last 10 years or so. From, I think it started out around $20, and now it's down to $16.50.
But I mean local registration fees?
There are no fees for registering. That's just for the FBI to check your fingerprints, and it's still just a one-time affair. And it wasn't the passage of that great number of outside guns coming in that caused the choke lines down at Berettini headquarters here on Oahu. It was Obama. The same thing happened when Clinton passed the first assault weapons ban. The lines got 4 hours long down there. I went down once to help my son register a gun during this period here, this last fall.
How long did it take you?
And we arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Not your normal office hours.
No, the only
you weren't buying a condominium or Christmas
opens
toy.
at 7. We took coffee, snacks, and lawn chairs, and we sat outside. The first guy in line, however, had been there since midnight, and we woke him up in his sleeping bag when it was time for him to stand up and get in line.
Yeah.
So it was that ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was all because of the scare and the run to purchase things that might not be available after Obama's reelection.
Yeah. Look, one of the big issues that developed in the latter part of last year, 2013, and is going to continue this year, has to do with the Cocoa Head firing range. And the chairman of the Hawaii Kai Neighborhood Board, Mr. Knudsen, had raised some allegations that there were bullets basically flying everywhere, that he had one whizzing by his ear, and then a woman showed a bullet hole in her car, and then a young couple said all of a sudden these things occurred. Well, you testified at the neighborhood board, and what's your take on this issue and the safety of the Cocoa Head Range?
Well, everybody that I know on both sides of the issue, from Chair Knudsen to the most rabid Second Amendment supporter in the state, are all interested in public safety. And they don't want to see anybody injured because of a range open. After that, there's a wide diversity of opinion about what needs to be done, and not much of it is based on that scientific fact that I like so much. I mean, that's part of my background. If you can prove it scientifically, if you have a controlled, randomized study with lots of numbers in it, and it's statistically significant, then I'll believe you. But what we're having here is hearsay. One side says there have been dozens of bullets, and well, at the last neighborhood board meeting in October, Chair Knudsen tried to elicit from the policeman who was there just giving the routine neighborhood board statistics. When he mentioned Cocoa Head, Knudsen asked him, well, how many bullet strikes were there? And I think at that time Knudsen was counting 3, and the police officer stuck by his report, says we know of 2.
Yeah.
But now there are dozens that have somehow appeared, and they've been suppressed. Nobody's gone into it. It's not quite that situation. The situation out there is normal, actually, because the range started operation in 1937. The Bishop Estate gave it to the city and county so long as it remained a park, and it was immediately used for military training. When civilian use of it started, I don't know, probably not until after the war, because there was martial law after the war. Guns were confiscated, only from Japanese, but you could confiscate any guns. The military governor here could do that. But there have been civilian shooting activities out there for 30, 40, 50 years now. And at the time when the range was built, Henry Kaiser hadn't built anything out there. There was a bay there, but it was relatively undeveloped. The road was a gravel road, kind of like the one around Kaina Point right now, I think. Beach access was there, but the
so it's kind of like the people that move in around an existing airport or something, then complain about the noise and flyovers.
As far as ranges are concerned, the term is encroachment. And the safety practices that are in effect in 1937 aren't good enough anymore. There have been 2 periods when there was great concern, I think. One was back in the 90s, early 90s, when Cocoa Head was undergoing revamping because they wanted to open up Hanauma Bay as a tourist thing. And they built a new parking lot. And at that time, the construction crews found some bullets on the new blacktop. So shooting was stopped on that side of the range. In fact, shooting was stopped on both sides of the range for over 10 months while the range was reconfigured.
We're running short of time, but I know that there was a report done, and I know that the Hawaii Rifle Association and a number of citizens have always supported improvements to the range, but those improvements have not been made. Is that an accurate
More
statement?
recently, we knew of 2 bullet strikes that
Yeah.
went over the last couple of years. One was an unfortunate incident where the Army was actually allowed to shoot 400 rounds of 50 Browning machine gun out there. And one of the bullets degloved, sent the steel insert over into a university professor's house on the other side of the mountain.
Of all the people, a university professor's house, right?
He contacted the Hawaii Rifle Association, and we
Yeah.
got to investigate that. It was an inappropriate use of the range, and after that, some of the berms were reconfigured, and 50 BMG was banned from the range. The second things have happened more recently, and they reflect probably the increased interest over long distance shooting.
Yeah.
There were some unofficial steel targets up there, and the Department of Parks hasn't yet decided exactly what they're
You
going to
have
do
a
about
you
it.
have a map, or you have a photo that you
Yeah,
can show us
sure.
of the area?
Yeah.
What are we looking at here?
I just went on Google Earth, and you can see this yellow line that the program allows you to draw. That's the straight line would be from the front of the rifle range to the bullet impact that was reported on the news, and that's about 2,700 yards, so that's reasonable. And more important, it shows that the slope of the crater there is pretty gentle.
Yeah.
So that if there was a piece of steel laying halfway up the mountain on its side, it's reasonable that shooting at that would have caused that kind of ricochet.
Max, we're running out of time. If people want more information, can they contact the Hawaii Rifle Association? Or
Sure,
what's the
we've
best
got
way
a
to
website,
and
Hawaii Rifle Association.
Hawaii Rifle Association. Okay, well, we can do more of this during the legislative session upcoming, because I know there'll be more issues. We thank you.
It's a city issue, really, and they're
It
going to
is.
get to it, and they're going to take care of Cocoa Head. They're going to do it right
Good.
this time.
Our guest has been Dr. Maxwell Cooper. I'm Sam Slom, and we're wishing you a better day. Aloha.